Okay, let's unpack this. I want you to close your eyes for a second. Seriously, humor me here.
Uh-oh, where are we going?
I want you to conjure up an image of the 1980s. What do you see?
Neon colors, synthesizers, big hair.
Sure, all that, but specifically regarding cartoons, you're probably thinking of He-Man.
Oh, absolutely. Castle Grayskull, Battle Cat, the whole thing.
You're picturing a guy who is, essentially a bodybuilder with a page boy haircut, wearing what looks like fur underwear, holding a massive sword aloft.
And yelling, "I have the power," at the top of his lungs.
Yes, it is high fantasy, it's campy, and it is very, very simple. Good guys, bad guys, skeletons, magic.
It's the definition of a Saturday morning cartoon. It was designed to sell toys, tell a simple moral story, and wrap it all up in 20 minutes.
Exactly. Now, I want you to take that mental image, that absolute icon of 80s masculinity and nostalgia, and I want you to drag him kicking and screaming into the cultural landscape of 2024.
Okay, I'm with you.
Because today, we aren't talking about a toy line. We aren't talking about a fun reboot for kids. We are talking about a massive, sprawling cultural flashpoint that has somehow managed to center itself on this barbarian.
It is genuinely bizarre when you zoom out. Really think about it. We are looking at a situation where a cartoon character has become the catalyst for a debate involving linguistics.
Right.
The definition of comedy, political strategy, and I'm not exaggerating here, deep theological arguments regarding the nature of objective truth.
It sounds like a fever dream. It really does. But this is the world we live in. We are doing a deep dive today into a really fascinating and frankly quite intense analysis from a source called the Trent Report. The video in question is titled Woke Meltdown. They're defending He-Man's pronouns in the trailer.
And just to set the stage, our mission here is to dissect the source material provided. We have the commentary from that video. We have the reaction tweets, the articles they referenced. We're going to trace how a single tiny image in a movie trailer sparked a war between Amazon MGM Studios, viral commentators like John Del Arroyo's,
We'll get to him.
satirists like Joel Berry, and religious figures like Bishop Burbage.
It's a cast of characters that you would never expect to be in the same room, let alone arguing about the same topic.
No.
And honestly, when I first saw the headline, I rolled my eyes a bit. I thought, okay, people are mad about a movie trailer. What else is... But the more I read through this source material, the more I realized that He-Man here is just a proxy.
That's the key insight. He-Man is the vehicle, but the payload is a discussion about normalization.
Normalization.
It's about how ideas move from the fringe to the center of culture. It's about the Overton window, what is acceptable to talk about and what isn't. And ultimately, it's about whether language is a tool for describing reality or a tool for shaping it.
So we have a lot of ground to cover. We're going to talk about something called clapter comedy. We're going to talk about the millennial woes meme.
Which is some deep internet lore, yeah.
And we're going to get into a very heavy comparison to the sitcom Will and Grace. But let's start at the beginning. The cattle. The thing that actually happened.
Right. We need to look at the Masters of the Universe movie trailer, the scene that lit the fuse.
So paint the scene for us. We aren't in Castle Grayskull. All right. We're not in Eternia.
No. And that's the first jarring element for fans. The scene in question features Adam, who is, He-Man's alter ego in an office setting.
An office.
It's a modern, sterile corporate environment, fluorescent lights, gray cubicles, the whole 9 yards.
Which is already a choice. Taking a high fantasy character and putting him in a cubicle. It's a classic fish out of water setup.
It is a very deliberate one.
Correct.
But the controversy isn't about the setting. It's about a prop. Tiny detail. There is a shot of Adam's desk, and on that desk, there is a name placard.
Like the ones you see in any office building.
Exactly. It says Adam Glenn. And right underneath the name, in that standard sans serif, HR-proof font we all know,
Yeah.
it says he, him.
Pronouns on the nameplate.
Pronouns on the name.
Now, to the average person walking down the street, seeing he, him on a name tag might just register as, oh, that's a corporate thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe they have them at their job. Maybe they don't. It's just part of the modern office landscape for a lot of people.
But for the online cultural commentators, specifically a guy named John Del Arroyo's, this was a nuclear bomb.
John Del Arroyo's is a science fiction author and a commentator who co-owns a site called Phantom Pulse. He's very much plugged into the culture war aspect of entertainment.
So he's looking for this stuff.
He's attuned to it, let's say. He took a screenshot of that placard, posted it on X, which used to be Twitter, and his reaction was immediate and, well, explosive.
I have the tweet right here. He wrote, "Now they're making a Masters of the Universe and giving He-Man pronouns. These people won't stop until they ruin everything."
And we need to pause on the scale of this. You might think, okay, a guy complained on Twitter. Big deal. But this post went absolutely stratospheric. The source notes, it had 6.12 million.
6.12 million. That is a staggering number. That's not just a niche group of angry fans. That is a stadium full of people engaging with this specific criticism.
It tells us that this struck a nerve. a really big one. It wasn't just about He-Man for them. For Del Arro's and the millions who engaged with that post, that nameplate wasn't just a piece of set dress.
It was a flag.
It was a flag. It was a territorial mark.
Explain that a bit more. Why is a simple nameplate a territorial marker? What is that?
Because in the eyes of the critic, specifically the perspective that the Trent Report is advocating for, the inclusion of pronouns is never new. It's never just a word.
Okay.
It is seen as a specific signal of allegiance to an ideology, what they consistently term gender ideology.
Right.
So by putting it in the movie, Amazon MGM isn't just decorating a set, they are signaling that the movie exists within the moral framework of that ideology.
So they see it as Amazon planting their flag and saying, we are on this side of the culture war, and we are dragging He-Man over here with us.
Precisely. And the Trent Report, our source, aligns fully with Del Arro's here. They argue that this isn't a throwaway gag. It's not an accident. They view it as a deliberate political signal designed to alienate a specific part of the audience while signaling virtue to another part.
Okay, now before we get into the backlash, because that's a whole other can of worms.
It is.
I want to touch on a concept the source brings up right at the start. They mention the millennial woes. This feels like some deep internet lore. Can you break this down for someone who doesn't spend 12 hours a day on?
Sure. And it's a crucial concept for understanding the dynamic of this whole argument. Millennial woes is a commentator, and the meme refers to an observation he made about how arguments play out between progressives, or leftists, as the source calls them, and conservatives.
Okay, what's the pattern he identified?
The pattern is what he calls feigned ignorance. The idea is that when a progressive is confronted with a criticism like, for example, why are there pronouns in He-Man?
Yeah.
They don't engage with the actual objection.
They don't engage with the substance.
No. Instead, they pretend not to understand why anyone would be upset in the first place.
So they play dumb. Is that the idea?
Effectively, yeah. The source describes it as pretending not to understand anything so discourse can never happen. It's a shutting down tactic.
Give me an example of how this looks in practice.
Okay, so imagine someone criticizes the nameplate, right? Del Arro's says this is them pushing an ideology.
Right.
The millennial woes response would be something like, I don't get it, it's just ink on plastic. Why does a little word scare you? Are you afraid of grammar?
It frames the critic as being irrational or obsessive, just stupid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like saying, why are you making a big deal out of nothing when the person using the tactic knows exactly why it's a big deal to the other person?
So the source argues that this is a form of gaslighting?
That's the word they use, yeah. The people making the movie and the people defending it, in this view, know that pronouns are a political hot potato. They know it signals a specific worldview regarding gender.
Of course they do.
But when called out on it, they retreat to, it's just a word, relax. The source argues this is a dishonest way to avoid having the actual debate about the ideology itself.
That makes a lot of sense. It's a way to win the argument by refusing to acknowledge the opponent's premise, which I have to say leads us perfectly into the counter-argument.
A counterattack.
Because the internet response to Del Arro's was massive, and a lot of it fell squarely into this category, Greg.
It did. It's just a joke. Defense became the primary shield for the movie, but it had two different forms.
Right. The first one being, you're an idiot for being mad at this.
And frankly, the joke was right there. I mean, the character's name is He-Man.
It is low-hanging fruit, linguistically speaking.
It really is.
The source lists a bunch of these responses, and I have to play devil's advocate here for a second. Some of them are kind of funny if you detach from the politics.
They're good dunks, yeah.
You have people just pointing out the absurdity of complaining about pronouns for a guy whose name is literally a pronoun.
It's an easy shot to take.
One user quoted in the source says, imagine your day being ruined by simply seeing the English language being... Another says, He-Man has literally had a pronoun in his name since the 80s. And then my favorite, right-wingers are upset. A guy literally called He-Man has pronouns. You can't make this crap up.
But notice the pattern we just discussed. See how it works.
Yeah, you're right.
These responses are framing the issue as linguistic illiteracy. They're saying, haha, these idiots don't know what a pronoun.
Right. They're completely ignoring the cultural meaning, the political meaning of the pronoun declaration on a nameplate.
Exactly. Del Arro's isn't angry because he doesn't know he is a pronoun. He's angry about the ritual of declaring pronouns on a nameplate. But the millennial woes tactic allows the defenders to sidestep that entire conversation and just mock him for not knowing grammar.
It's a very effective rhetorical trick. But there is another layer to the defense.
The more charitable defense.
Yes, the context defense. This is the argument that The movie isn't being woke, it's actually making a pun, a clever bit of wordplay.
A visual pun theory, yeah.
Right. The character is Adam. He's a regular, mundane guy in an office, but then he transforms into He-Man. So the nameplate is the setup for the transformation.
The argument is that it's a gag, from he-him to he-man.
Exactly. And this wasn't just random people on the internet. Mark Hemingway, who is a conservative commentator, actually took the side. He tweeted, "Come on, that's obviously a joke."
And another person, Skylar Scheller, said, dudes on here be taking perfectly written jokes for a film and making it political.
So you have this faction that's saying, guys, put down the pitchforks. It's a clever sight gag about his superhero name. You're overreacting.
A peace offering, almost.
But, and this is where the source, the Trent Report, really digs in, they aren't having it at all. And they aren't just fighting the so-called leftists. They're fighting the people on their own side who think it's just a joke.
This is the right versus right conflict, and it's fascinating to watch unfold. It shows that the anti-woke sphere isn't a monolith. There's a deep divide between what you might call the optimists and the realists, or perhaps the pessimists, depending on your view.
Let's talk about Joel Berry. He's a satirist, comes from that Babylon Bee world. He's usually the first guy to mock corporate DEI stuff.
Absolutely. That's his brand.
But here he's defending the trailer.
He is, and that caused a huge stir in those circles. Berry's argument is essentially, in the context of the trailer, it's clearly a dig against pronouns. Come on, man, don't shoot down what could be a good thing.
So Berry's take is that the movie is laughing at the pronoun. He thinks the joke is, look how silly and bureaucratic this corporate world is compared to a barbarian hero. He sees it as subversion.
Berry represents the viewer who wants to believe that the industry hasn't completely turned against them. He's looking for the silver lining. He thinks, surely putting He-Man next to a pronoun pin is meant to highlight how ridiculous the pin is.
He's hoping it's a wink and a nod to his side.
He is. But the Trent Report comes in and absolutely demolishes this take. They think Berry is being incredibly, dangerously naive.
Yeah, they do not hold back.
No. They accuse him of wishful thinking. The source flat out asks, where's the dig? Where is the joke at the expense of the pronoun? They argue there is absolutely no evidence in the trailer that the movie is critical of this stuff.
And they bring up a specific scene to back this up. This is what I call the bald black woman in HR argument.
Right. It's a key piece of evidence for their analysis. The source points out that immediately after you see the pronoun placard on the desk, the trailer cuts to Adam being lectured by a character the source describes as a bald black woman in HR.
Now, why is that specific description relevant to their argument? They're not describing a character, are they?
No, it's code.
Right.
For the critics, this character archetype, the stern, diverse HR representative, is a symbol of the current corporate DEI regime.
Okay, I see.
The source argued, look at the power dynamic in that scene. Who is in charge? It's not Adam. Adam is the one being solded. Adam is the one being lectured. He's shrinking in his chair.
So the argument is, if the movie was mocking woke culture, Adam would be the one rolling his eyes. He would be the one pointing out how silly it all is. But because he is submitting to it...
The movie is validating the HR lady.
Exactly.
Exactly. The source argues that the movie is aligning itself with the bald black woman in HR. She is the voice of reason and authority in the scene, and Adam is the bumbling idiot who needs to get with the program.
And therefore, the pronouns aren't a target of mockery. They're just part of the correct world that Adam is failing to fit into.
Precisely. From that perspective, the pronouns are presented as completely normal, and Adam is the one who is out of step.
It's a pretty cynical take, but when you look at the power dynamics of the scene they describe, I can see why they think that. It's not He-Man smashing the desk. It's He-Man getting a performance review.
And that submission is what angers them. But the source goes deeper than just analyzing the scene. They introduce a theoretical framework to explain why this joke, even if it is a joke, isn't actually funny. They call it clapter comedy.
Clapter! I love this term. It's so ugly, but it fits so well. Clap plus laughter. C-L-A-P-T-R.
It was coined, or at least popularized in this context, by a philosopher named Dr. Edward Fieser, who the source cites quite a bit. The concept is really important for understanding modern political humor.
So how do we distinguish clapter from actual genuine laugh?
That's the key question. Traditional humor usually comes from surprise, from incongruity, or from releasing tension. You laugh because something was unexpected or because a truth was revealed in a shocking, funny way. It's involuntary.
Right. You laugh before you think. It just comes out of you.
Exactly. Clapter, on the other hand, is voluntary. It's cognitive. The point of the humor isn't to be funny. The point is to signal political virtue.
So you think before you clap?
Yes. The audience isn't laughing because they are amused. They are applauding or clappering to show that they agree with the premise of the so-called joke.
It's like when a late-night host says something like, "And isn't this politician terrible?" And the audience just cheers. They aren't laughing at a punchline. They're cheering for the opinion.
Precisely. It functions as a loyalty test. It's an affirmation. And the source argues that the he-man pronoun joke is a perfect form of clapter.
How so? Walk me through that.
Okay, so for the joke to land in the way the clapter model suggests, you have to accept the premise that pronoun declarations are a normal, good thing.
Okay.
When the audience sees he, him, the intended reaction from the in-group isn't, haha, that's weird. It's supposed to be a nod of recognition. It's, good, they included pronouns. I agree with that.
Yeah.
I will now applaud, or at least smile knowingly, to show I am a good ally.
So it serves to validate the believers and alienate the non-believer. It sorts the audience.
Yes. Fieser notes that this type of comedy exacerbates social tension rather than soothing. Real comedy can bring people together by laughing at shared absurdity. Clapter functions to lead one faction in denigrating another. It's divisive by design.
That's a really fascinating way to look at it. It stops being entertainment and starts being a rally. The joke is just an applause.
That's the argument.
But the source doesn't stop at just calling it bad comedy. They take a massive leap here. They argue that this joke is actually part of a much darker, more insidious process. This brings us to the core argument of their whole analysis: normalization.
This is the meat of the deep dive.
Oh.
This is where we move from movie review to sociological.
The source argues that even if the writers intended it to be pun, let's give them the benefit of the doubt.
Okay.
Even then, because it relies on the existence familiarity of pronouns.
Right. The joke doesn't work unless the audience already knows what pronoun declarations are and accepts them as a common feature of life. By using it as a setup for a punchline in a mainstream movie, you are reinforcing the presence of pronouns in the shared cultural space. You are treating them as a given.
As normal.
As normal.
Yeah.
And this is where the source drops the Will and Grace analogy. And we really need to unpack this because it's a foundational belief for a lot of conservative cultural criticism.
It is. The source argues that the sitcom Will and Grace, which aired in the late 90s and early 2000s, was the primary vehicle that normalized sodomy and homosexuality.
And just for context, for listeners who might be younger, it's hard to overstate how big Will and Grace was. It was a massive primetime hit on a major network.
But at the time, having an openly gay main character was a huge risk for a network.
It was groundbreaking. But the source's argument is that the show didn't change culture by lecturing. It didn't have characters give speeches about gay rights. It changed culture by being funny.
It made the characters lovable. It made Will and Jack part of your weekly routine. You invited them into your living room every Thursday night.
Exactly. And because you were laughing with them, your defenses went down. The source views comedy as a Trojan horse.
The Trojan horse. I like that.
When you are laughing, you aren't critically analyzing the moral implications of what you are watching. You are just enjoying the story. You're disarmed.
So the argument is that Will and Grace took something that was considered radical or taboo by a large chunk of the country, and by wrapping it in jokes and likable characters, they made it normal. They shifted the Overton window, the range of acceptable ideas, without anyone even realizing it happened.
That is the theory, yeah. And the source believes the exact same mechanic is happening right now with the He-Man trailer.
So by putting the pronouns on the desk, even as a joke, they're doing the same thing that Will and Grace did for gay culture, but for what they call gender ideology.
Yes. The source notes that the placard appears as a routine, unremarkable part of the wordplay, and they argue that this very ordinary problem.
Right, because if the movie made a huge speech about pronouns, people would put their guards up. They would argue back in their heads.
Of course, it would feel like propaganda. But by just having it there in the background, sitting on the desk like a stapler or a coffee mug.
It bypasses the defense mechanism. It presents the ideology as settled reality. It says, this is just how the world is now. Even He-Man does it. Why are you making a fuss?
It's the banality of it that makes it so effective as a tool of normalization. It teaches the audience that pronouns in bio is just standard operating procedure. It's boring.
And that, according to the source, is how you lose the culture war. You don't lose it in a big, pitched battle with speeches and debates. You lose it when the radical becomes the routine, the mundane.
When it becomes boring.
Now, if we stopped here, this would be a pretty standard political analysis. Media influences culture. Okay, got it. We've heard that before. But the source goes somewhere else, somewhere much, much heavier. They bring in a Catholic bishop, Bishop Burbage.
This is where we cross the Rubicon from cultural analysis into theology.
We aren't just talking about political preference. We are talking about the truth with a capital T, objective, divine reality.
And the source relies heavily on a letter from Bishop Burbage to establish the moral stakes of this issue. And I want to be clear here. for you listening. We are going to report on what the bishop said to understand the source's mindset. The language he used is incredibly stark.
It is. The source and the bishop define what they call the ideology of gender, not just as a political difference, but as a wicked ideology.
That's the direct quote, wicked ideology.
They explicitly state that it leads people away from the truth, and they don't mince words about the physical consequence. They specifically mention mutilating surgery and self-harm.
Whoa, okay. That is a massive escalation from I don't like this movie trailer.
A huge one. But you have to understand the internal logic here. If you truly believe, as the bishop and the source clearly do, that the ideology behind those pronouns leads children to chemically or surgically alter their bodies in ways that are irreversible and, in their view, deeply harmful,
then you can't view the nameplate as a joke.
Exact. If you see it as a pathway to what you believe is mutilation, then seeing He-Man participate in horrifying. It would be like seeing He-Man endorse, I don't know, smoking cigarettes in a 1950s cartoon, but infinitely worse in their eyes.
Much worse.
Yeah.
And this leads to the concept of compelled speech. The bishop argues, and this is another quote, in no circumstances should anyone be compelled to use language contrary to the truth.
Language contrary to the truth. Unpack that for me. Because most people on the other side would say using someone's preferred pronouns is just being polite, just being nice.
The bishop addresses that directly. It's a key part of his argument. He uses the phrase, clarity must always be at the service of charity.
That sounds catchy, but what does it actually mean?
Okay, so in modern culture, charity or love usually means affirming someone or making them feel good, validating their feelings. But in this theological tradition, charity means willing the ultimate good of the other person. And if you believe the ultimate good is for them to live in alignment with objective truth, as they see it, then lying to someone, even to make them feel better in the short term, is actually an act of cruelty.
So if I call someone by a pronoun that you believe contradicts their biological sex, the bishop would argue, I am not being nice, I am helping them live a lie. And from his perspective, that is a sin against charity.
Exactly. He argues that using gender-affirming terms or pronouns conveys approval of a rejection of the truth. Therefore, for people who share this belief, there's a moral imperative to refuse to use that language.
And this brings us right back to The Office. The source points out that in the movie, the placard is presented as a routine, unremarkable part of the work.
And for the source, that image represents a system of coercion. It represents a workplace where you must display your pronoun, or you must participate in what they see as a lie, or you will be fired or ostracized.
So when they see He-Man with that, they don't see a hero, see a capitulation. They see a man broken by...
They see He-Man submitting to the HR department. They see the barbarian, the ultimate symbol of raw, unpained masculinity, being tamed by the bureaucracy.
That is a wildly depressing image if you're coming from that point of view.
It is. The source frames it as the ultimate humiliation. It's not just that He-Man is in an office. It's that he has surrendered his ability to speak the truth. He's playing the game to keep his job.
So, bringing it all together, the source then circles back to Joel Berry, the guy who thought it was a dig, and now I see why they were so harsh on him.
Yes. In light of these enormous theological stakes, Berry's, it's just a joke. Defense looks incredibly weak to them. It looks trivial.
They accuse Berry of defending the rather than oppose, of providing cover for the other side.
The source is drawing a hard line, and they're saying there is no middle ground. You cannot say, oh, maybe they're mocking it. If you do that, you're being what they would call a useful idiot for the other side.
Wow.
You're giving them plausible deniability.
The source claims that SJW's social justice warriors follow a specific playbook. They call it the lie, double down project cycle.
Right. And it breaks down like this. First, the lie. They say it's not happening or it's just a joke.
That's the millennial woes meme we talked about.
Exactly. Step 2 is double down. When you call them out on it, they don't back off. They put more of it in the next thing they make.
And step 3, project. They accuse you of being the obsessed weird one for noticing it in the first place.
Right. Why do you care so much? It's just a cartoon.
So the source claims that when the leftists pretend the criticism is silly, that is the gas. They believe the other side knows exactly that the placard is an attempt to normalize.
And therefore, the source concludes that the only proper response is total rejection. You cannot laugh at the joke. You cannot hope it's subversion. You have to reject the premise entirely.
The final call to action from the source is surprisingly spiritual. It's not just boycott the movie. It's fear God rather than man.
It is an exhortation to courage. The source encourages viewers to be charitable in that specific theological sense we discussed, but to speak the truth, to reject the pressure to adopt culturally approved terminology if it contradicts what they believe is reality.
It really is amazing. We started with a plastic nameplate in a YouTube trailer for a movie about a guy who rides a green tiger.
A talking green tiger, no less.
And we ended up with a sermon on fearing God. and rejecting the pressures of modern society.
That is the nature of the culture war in 2024. There are no small battles anymore. Every image, every word, every joke is analyzed for its metaphysics.
So let's try to synthesize all of this. We've looked at the source material, and it's clear that for the people involved in this debate, this is not about a cartoon.
No. Not at all. It's about, I think, three main things. First, linguistics, the power of language to shape, not just describe, reality.
Right.
Second, comedy, the mechanism of clapter and how humor is being used, in their view, to enforce political conformity.
And the
theology, a perceived moral obligation to speak the truth, even when the culture demands you participate in a lie.
So the key takeaway for you, our listener here, whether you agree with the source and the bishop or whether you think they are reading way, way too much into a prop.
Which is a totally valid position to hold.
Is that nothing is just a joke anymore.
That is the reality we live in. Every piece of media is analyzed for its role in either normalizing or critiquing a worldview. The debate isn't about He-Man. It's about whether specific language, in this case pronoun, should be treated as neutral and routine or as an endorsement of a specific contested ideology.
And the source is adamant. Treating it as routine is the victory for the ideology. If you shrug your shoulders at the nameplate, they've already won.
Correct. Neutrality is impossible in their view. You either oppose it or you are even passively helping to normalize.
So here is a thought to leave you with. And I want to go back to that Will and Grace comparison because I can't get it out of my head. It's a very provocative idea.
It is.
Regardless of where you stand on the issue of pronouns or gender, I want you to ask, to what extent does humor serve as the most effective tool for shifting that Overton window?
It is a powerful question. Arguments put people on the defensive. If I scream at you, you scream back.
What?
But a joke invites you to lower your guard. A joke asks you to be part of the in-group.
So does laughing at a concept eventually lead to accepting it? Or, in the case of He-Man, does merely seeing it on a desk again and again make it so boring, so mundane, that we just stop questioning it altogether?
That is the question. Is boredom the ultimate tool of revolution? If they can make the radical seem boring, have they won?
Something to think about the next time you see a trailer breakdown on YouTube. It might be about more than just thanks for diving deep with us.
Until next time.